Picture this. A day at the circus. You know the scene. Smell of popcorn, sawdust in the air,
Yeah.
the roar of the crowd, waiting for something truly spectacular.
Right.
Now, imagine that scene turning into absolute terror, like a fire engulfed the big top, trapping, thousands of people in a raging inferno.
Yeah, it's a chilling thought. And sadly, not just something we made up, this is what actually happened in Hartford, Connecticut on July 6th, 1944, a day forever remembered for the devastating Hartford Circus fire.
We're diving into the Morbid podcast episode.
Yeah.
MRB EP 587 Hartford Circus Fire adful.mp3.
Okay.
Trying to uncover, the events of that fateful day, exploring not just the fire itself, but the historical context, the investigations, and the mysteries that still linger.
It's a story that even decades later, continues to fascinate and horrify, reminding us how important safety is, accountability, and the human capacity for both tragedy and resilience.
Right.
Yeah.
The year's 1944. America's in the middle of World War II. And the nation's craving some distraction, a glimmer of hope, joy amidst anxieties of wartime. And the circus, with its promise of spectacle and escapism, provided just that.
Absolutely.
The Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus was the undisputed king,
Yeah.
the greatest show on earth, a symbol of American entertainment and grandeur.
Absolutely. I mean, their history goes all the way back to the 19th century,
Oh, wow.
with the two iconic circus families merging their acts in 1919 to create this, massive spectacle.
Right.
The scale of their operation was really impressive.
Yeah.
They employed over 1,000 people, traveled across the country by train, and boasted a menagerie of exotic animals.
Oh, wow.
You're talking camels, big cats, bears, elephants, horses.
It was a traveling city, a world unto itself, captivating audiences with breathtaking feats of daring exotic animals and, of course, the clowns.
And during a time when so many men were overseas fighting,
Yeah.
the circus offered families a much-needed escape, a chance to experience some joy, wonder amidst the uncertainties of war.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And, in fact, President Roosevelt granted Ringling Brothers special rail privileges, recognizing how important the circus was in boosting morale on the home front.
Absolutely. I mean, it really highlights how significant, the role the circus played in American culture and society at that time.
But beneath the dazzling facade of the greatest show on earth, there were these whispers of, a darker side,
Yeah.
reports of inhumane animal treatment, worker exploitation, and perhaps most alarmingly, a disregard for safety protocols,
Okay.
especially when it came to fire.
Yeah, you're right. Sadly, circus fires were not, a new thing.
Okay.
There were a number of incidents in the years leading up to the Hartford fire that kind of, foreshadowed the potential for disaster.
Give me an example.
So, for example, in 1940, the Clyde Beatty Circus, they experienced this devastating fire in Indiana.
Oh, wow.
Resulted in the loss of over 100 animals, including 6 lions, 2 leopards, 15 antelope, and, those poor monkeys.
Monkeys. Oh, no.
Yeah, it's really sad.
That's awful.
And then in 1942, Ringling Brothers themselves had a fire in Cleveland, caused substantial damage, and a number of animals died.
These incidents paint kind of a disturbing picture of negligence and failure to prioritize safety,
Yeah.
creating this ticking time bomb waiting to explode.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, Hartford would become the site of that explosion, the place where these long-standing safety concerns would converge with, tragic consequences.
So on July 5th, 1944, the Ringling Brothers Circus arrived in Hartford, Connecticut.
Right.
But from the start, there were signs that this particular stop wouldn't be like the others.
Oh, wow. So...
A late arrival forced the crew to rush the setup, which, for the superstitious circus folk, was already a bad omen.
This rush setup, it's a crucial detail. It highlights this culture that seemed to prioritize speed and efficiency over, thoroughness and safety.
Yeah.
A culture that, sadly, would play a role in the unfolding tragedy.
So then there was the big top itself.
Right.
This massive tent, over 100,000 square feet, hastily erected under this scorching summer sun.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where it gets, really unsettling.
Yeah.
The canvas of the big top, meant to protect the audience from the elements, was treated with a mixture of gasoline and paraffin wax for weatherproofing.
Gasoline and wax.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
They know, right?
It's almost like they were unknowingly creating the perfect tinderbox.
Yeah. It's a shocking detail, a blatant disregard for basic fire safety. It's almost unbelievable in hindsight.
Right.
But it speaks volumes about the lack of awareness and concern for fire safety at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a chilling reminder that even, seemingly small oversights, especially when combined with a disregard for safety protocols, can have catastrophic consequences.
Right. So the following day, July 6th, dawned bright and sunny.
Yeah.
A perfect day for a circus, some might say.
Right.
But with temperatures soaring close to 90 degrees, it was already an uncomfortable day for the nearly 7,000 people who packed into that big top.
You gotta remember, the crowd was mostly like women, children, the elderly.
Right.
A lot of the men were away serving in the war. So this was like a rare opportunity for families to enjoy a day of entertainment,
Right.
escape from the anxieties of wartime life.
So it's heartbreaking to think that a day intended for joy and laughter would turn into such a horrific tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, the crowd's composition, with so many vulnerable people present,
Oh, sorry.
makes the unfolding events all the more tragic.
So the show began with the usual fanfare, I'm assuming.
Right.
Merle Evans and his big show band played the Star-Spangled Banner.
Yeah.
The ringmaster led a parade of animals, and the crowd was captivated by, dazzling performances from showgirls and animal trainers.
I mean, just imagine the scene.
Right.
The excitement, the vibrant colors, the anticipation in the air. I mean, the contrast between this joyful atmosphere and the impending disaster, makes the story all the more impactful.
Yeah, so a little past 2:30 p.m., as the renowned Flying Wallendas prepared for their high wire act, a small fire was spotted on one of the tent wall panels.
Yeah, this seemingly insignificant spark, it would ignite a chain of events leading to, like, unimaginable devastation. A stark reminder that even in a setting filled with wonder and excitement, danger can lurk in the most unexpected places.
So an usher noticed the flame, I'm assuming about 5 feet up the panel, and immediately sprang into action.
Right.
He and 2 other ushers grabbed water buckets, rushed to extinguish the fire.
Yeah, this is where we see, the first sign of trouble. While their quick response is commendable, their reliance on simple water buckets,
All right.
to combat a fire in such a large, flammable structure was utterly inadequate.
Yeah, I mean, and their efforts proved futile.
Yeah.
The fire, fueled by the dry, treated canvas, was spreading rapidly.
This highlights, the importance of having appropriate fire suppression equipment
Right.
readily available, especially in venues with large crowds. I mean, water buckets were simply no match for a fire of this magnitude.
Right. One of the ushers even attempted to pull down the burning panel as part of their fire safety protocol,
Right.
but it was secured, like, too tightly to the roof.
Right.
And the flames continued to climb higher, reaching a point of no return.
Yeah, this moment is critical. You
Yeah.
know? The fire's progression to the roof, which was laden with that flammable paraffin wax, signaled a dramatic escalation in the danger.
Right.
It was a clear sign that this was no longer a containable situation.
So realizing the gravity of the situation, the ushers started to evacuate the audience, but panic was already starting to set in.
Right. I mean, imagine the confusion. People are there to see a show, to be entertained. Some initially, thought the fire was part of the act
Oh, wow.
and remained seated while others hesitated, uncertain of what to do.
Right. I mean, it's a natural human reaction in such a chaotic and unfamiliar situation. But unfortunately, those delayed reactions would have devastating consequences.
Absolutely. The combination of, confusion, delayed reactions, and the rapidly spreading fire created a perfect storm for disaster.
So it gets even more terrifying. In an attempt to alert the performers and staff of the emergency without alarming the audience, the band leader was instructed to play Stars and Stripes Forever, the circus's designated disaster march.
This practice, while well-intentioned, likely added to the confusion. Imagine hearing patriotic circus music while a fire is raging overhead, molten wax dripping down on you.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, it's a surreal and horrifying image.
Absolutely terrifying. And as the band played on, the fire reached the wax-coated fringe of the tent roof and just erupted in a blinding flash. Thick, toxic smoke quickly filled the air, and the audience finally erupted into a full-blown panic.
Yeah, the speed at which the fire spread, fueled by those highly flammable materials, is, like a stark lesson in the importance of fire-retardant materials in public spaces.
Right.
This tragedy, as horrific as it was, led to, significant changes in fire safety regulations for circuses and other large gatherings.
It's Tragic reminder that sometimes it takes a devastating event to force us to confront our complacency and implement necessary safety measures.
Indeed. And sadly, in this case, the price of that lesson was incredibly high.
So, as if the situation couldn't get any worse, the generator blew, plunging the entire tent into darkness.
Right.
The ringmaster tried desperately to calm the crowd and direct them toward the exits, but his voice was lost in the screams and the chaos.
Yeah, that power outage amplified the terror and disorientation. Suddenly people were trapped in a smoke-filled inferno, unable to see where they were going or,
Yeah.
find their way out. It's a nightmare scenario.
Especially for those trapped in the center of the tent with no clear path to those exits.
Right.
It's unimaginable.
Yeah, the psychological impact on the survivors, I mean, it must have been profound.
Oh, yeah.
The trauma of that day, the fear, the confusion, the sights and sounds of that fire, it likely stayed with them for the rest of their lives.
So as the fire raged on, the heat began to melt the paraffin wax on the roof. So imagine this, large burning droplets of molten wax raining down on the fleeing crowd. I mean, it's a horrific detail that just adds another layer of horror to this tragedy.
I know, the burns inflicted by that molten wax were horrific, causing immense pain and suffering. It's a detail that, for me, really underscores the truly gruesome nature of this event.
People were being burned, trampled, and crushed as they desperately tried to escape.
The performers, recognizing the danger, climbed down from their rigging and headed for the animal exit, a route that was unfortunately unfamiliar to the panicked audience.
And the flying wilderness later recounted having to climb over cages of terrified animals just to reach safety.
Their familiarity with the tent's layout and emergency exits, it gave them a crucial advantage.
Right.
It highlights the importance of emergency preparedness and
Mhm.
training for anyone working in, large-scale entertainment venues.
It's a reminder that knowing what to do and where to go in an emergency can truly be the difference between life and death.
Absolutely. And sadly, for many in that audience, the main exits quickly became, clogged with people pushing, shoving, just desperate to escape the inferno.
And many were overcome by the smoke and heat, collapsing inside the tent, unable to reach safety.
Yeah, that bottleneck at the exits was a major factor in the high death toll. It's a stark example of how crowd dynamics can turn deadly in emergency situations,
Right.
emphasizing the need for clear evacuation procedures and multiple, easily accessible exits.
Outside the tent, the scene was one of absolute horror.
Yeah.
Circus workers and bystanders watched in disbelief as people stumbled out of the burning tent, some engulfed in flames, others desperately trying to tear through the canvas to escape.
There are, countless firsthand accounts from that day that paint a vivid picture of the chaos and desperation. It's truly a testament to the human capacity for both bravery and despair in the face of such tragedy.
One witness, an Army private named Bob Enworth, described seeing the 17-ton canvas roof go up in smoke like a piece of cellophane in less than 10 minutes.
Wow.
It's hard to imagine the speed and intensity of that fire.
Yeah, that fire's rapid consumption of the tent speaks to the extreme flammability of the materials used in its construction. It's a chilling example of how quickly a seemingly safe structure can turn into a death trap.
Enworth also described the heroic efforts of the circus performers, many of whom suffered burns as they helped people to safety.
Yeah.
Some even tossed children from the bleachers to workers waiting below, risking their own lives to save others.
Yeah, these acts of heroism amidst the chaos, they're truly inspiring. They demonstrate the human capacity for selflessness and courage in the face of, unimaginable danger. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who rise to the occasion, putting the well-being of others above their own.
It's those stories of human compassion and bravery that help us find a glimmer of hope amidst such a horrific tragedy.
Absolutely. And there are so many examples of it from that day. The renowned clown Emmett Kelly, famous for his sad-faced character Weary Willie, selflessly led dozens of children to safety.
It's a powerful image, a clown, a symbol of laughter and joy, becoming a beacon of hope and safety for those terrified children.
It really speaks to the profound impact that even brief encounters can have, especially during times of intense stress and trauma. Imagine those children, years later, remembering how a clown, of all people, saved their lives.
So just 20 minutes after it began, the fire burned itself out, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable devastation. The big top was reduced to smoldering rubble, and the initial death toll was estimated at 136.
But sadly, that number would continue to climb as the injured succumbed to their wounds in hospitals across Connecticut. The final death toll reached a staggering 168, making it one of the deadliest fires in American history.
So the identification process was a harrowing task.
Yeah.
Many victims were burned beyond recognition, and a temporary morgue was set up at the state armory to accommodate the overwhelming number of bodies.
It's difficult to even comprehend the grief and despair of those families as they, search for their loved ones among the rows of victims.
And in the chaos and confusion, local police were overwhelmed by reports of missing children.
Right.
Some were found wandering the circus grounds alone, searching for their parents, while others were taken in by strangers who, brought them to police stations later that evening.
Yeah, the plight of these unaccompanied children is particularly heartbreaking. Separated from their families, facing unimaginable fear and uncertainty.
Yeah.
It underscores the devastating impact of the fire on the youngest members of the community.
Right. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit that so many were able to, cope with such a traumatic experience.
It also speaks to the compassion of those who stepped in to help, providing, comfort and care to those in need. Those acts of kindness, both big and small, help to mitigate the tragedy's impact on the community.
So as the community grappled with the scale of this tragedy, questions naturally arose about the cause of the fire. The circus's publicity agent initially claimed that faulty wiring was to blame,
Okay.
but several eyewitnesses, including the ushers who first spotted the fire, pointed to a discarded cigarette in the men's room as the likely culprit.
Oh. Yeah, this discrepancy highlights the importance of thorough and impartial investigations in cases like this. Determining the fire's cause was crucial for establishing accountability and preventing similar tragedies in the future.
Right, and as the investigation unfolded, the finger of blame increasingly pointed toward Ringling Brothers. People were outraged by the revelations of lax safety protocols and the use of those highly flammable materials in the Big Top.
Yeah, the public's outrage is understandable. The tragedy exposed a systemic disregard for safety that had deadly consequences.
Right.
It sparked calls for greater accountability and stricter regulations to prevent future disasters.
And State Attorney James Kennedy, summing up the public sentiment, stated that the circus had failed to provide adequate firefighting equipment or sufficient personnel to operate it. He declared the canvas tent itself, treated with that mixture of paraffin and gasoline, a, quote, dangerous fire hazard.
Yeah, that statement underscores the key takeaways from this tragedy. The need for robust safety measures, responsible use of materials, and a culture of accountability in large-scale entertainment venues.
So the investigation ultimately led to the arrest of 7 Ringling Brothers officials, including the vice president, general manager, and the boss canvas man.
Wow.
They were charged with manslaughter, and all but one were found guilty and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 6 months to 7 years.
These convictions marked a turning point in public perception of safety regulations.
Okay.
The tragedy highlighted the need to, hold individuals accountable for negligence and to prioritize, public safety over profit or entertainment value.
The Hartford Circus fire left an indelible mark on the city, a scar that would take generations to heal. But as the years passed, the question of the fire's cause remained a haunting mystery. And then, in 1950, the case took an unexpected turn.
Yeah, this is where the narrative takes a, fascinating, albeit somewhat unsettling turn. The emergence of Robert Segui adds a layer of complexity to the story, raising questions about guilt, responsibility, and the reliability of confessions.
So police in Ohio arrested a 21-year-old man named Robert Segui, who confessed not only to setting the Hartford fire, but also to 4 murders and over 80 other arson cases.
Wow, it was a shocking revelation.
Right.
But Segui's confession was met with skepticism from some quarters. His claims of mental illness and hallucinations raised doubts about the veracity of his statements.
So Segui claimed he had worked as a laborer for Ringling Brothers at the time of the fire.
Right.
And that he'd been ordered to set the fire by the Red Indian, a spirit he claimed to hallucinate.
It's a bizarre and disturbing detail.
Yeah.
That adds another layer of, intrigue to the story.
And Segui's parents confirmed that he had indeed run away to join the circus in 1944. So while his employment with Ringling Brothers couldn't be definitively confirmed, it certainly seemed plausible.
Right. This parental confirmation lent some credibility to Segui's story. even if his claims of hallucinations and spirit voices remain dubious.
So Segi eventually signed a written confession, taking full responsibility for the Hartford fire and those other crimes. After a psychiatric evaluation, he was deemed, uh, sane enough to stand trial.
Yeah, that determination of sanity, while significant for legal proceedings, doesn't necessarily confirm the truthfulness of Segi's confession.
Right.
It simply means he was considered capable of understanding the charges against him and participating in his defense.
Right. So in November 1950, he pleaded guilty to a range of charges, including arson and murder, and he was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 2 to 20 years in prison. But years later, he recanted his confession, insisting that he had nothing to do with the Hartford fire.
Yeah, this recantation further, muddies the waters. Yeah. It raises questions about whether Segi's initial confession was coerced, influenced by, mental instability, or perhaps, a desperate attempt to gain notoriety.
It's a truly perplexing twist in the story, leaving us with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
So while Segi's involvement remains a possibility, the true cause of the Hartford Circus fire, sadly, continues to be shrouded in mystery.
Right. Despite Segi's confession and subsequent recantation, the focus shifted back to the initial findings of the investigation. The negligence, the flammable materials, and those inadequate safety procedures.
Right.
Those factors remain the most likely contributors to the tragedy, regardless of whether a single individual intentionally started the fire.
So as the decades passed, the memory of the Hartford Circus fire continued to haunt the city. But the story of this tragedy doesn't end with the flames and the investigations. There's another layer to this deep dive, a layer that speaks to the enduring power of human compassion and the tireless pursuit of truth and justice.
Yeah, this is where the narrative shifts from, tragedy to a story of remembrance, determination, and the enduring impact of a single individual's commitment to uncovering the truth. Rick Davies' dedication to identifying Little Miss 1565 is both, heartbreaking and inspiring.
It's a testament to the human spirit's ability to find meaning and purpose, even in the face of overwhelming loss and tragedy. So in the early 1990s, Hartford Fire Lieutenant Rick Davey became fixated on one of the 6 victims who remain nameless.
Yeah.
A young girl known only as Little Miss 1565.
It's incredible to think that, even decades after such a horrific event, there were still, unidentified victims.
Right.
Davies' dedication to this case speaks volumes about, his empathy and his unwavering commitment to honoring the victims.
Who's determined to, give this unknown girl a name, a proper burial after all these years. So what did his search involve?
I mean, Davies spent countless hours poring over old photographs, witness statements, coroner's reports, anything that might, offer a clue to her identity. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Incredibly, he found it.
He did. Davey eventually discovered a photograph that seemed to match Little Miss 1565.
Wow.
And then, something out of a detective novel, he meticulously traced the photo back to its origin and learned the girl's name, Eleanor Cook.
Eleanor Cook. So after all this time, Little Miss 1565 finally had a name. But why hadn't her family come forward to claim her?
It's a heartbreaking story. Eleanor had been at the circus with her mother and 2 younger brothers.
Right.
And tragically, one brother died in the fire, and their mother was severely burned and hospitalized for months.
Oh, wow.
They were simply in no position to, identify or claim Eleanor.
That's just devastating. To lose a child in such a horrific way, and then to be unable to even, give them a proper burial.
It really underscores the, ripple effect of this tragedy. The impact on the survivors and their families was, immense and long-lasting.
So what happened to Eleanor's family after the fire?
Well, Davy was able to track down her surviving brother, Donald. Right. And after decades of uncertainty, the family was finally able to lay Eleanor to rest in a marked grave.
It's a beautiful ending to a truly heartbreaking story.
Yeah.
It's amazing that someone could bring closure to a family after so many years. But even with Eleanor identified, the true cause of the fire is still a bit of a mystery, isn't it?
It is. Robert Sega's confession is intriguing but questionable.
Right.
Ultimately, though, whether it was a discarded cigarette or arson, the underlying issue remains the same. that shocking disregard for safety protocols and the use of highly flammable materials in a structure packed with thousands of people.
It's hard to believe that they used gasoline and paraffin wax to weatherproof the tent, you know. It seems almost unbelievable.
It does, doesn't it? But it highlights a crucial takeaway from this tragedy, the importance of prioritizing safety over spectacle. Right.
You know, the Hartford Circus fire, while horrifying, led to significant changes in fire codes and regulations for public gatherings.
So something positive did come out of this tragedy.
Absolutely. You know, there's a much greater awareness of fire safety now, and regulations are much stricter. But it's also important to remember the human side of this story.
Yeah.
The acts of heroism, the resilience of the survivors, and the unwavering dedication of people like Rick Davey.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This deep dive has been incredibly informative, but also emotionally heavy. So what are your final thoughts on the Hartford Circus fire?
For me, it's a reminder that even in the face of tragedy,
Yeah.
the human spirit can endure. It's also like a call to action to never become complacent about safety and to always remember the lessons learned from past tragedies.
Well said. And to our listeners, we ask, what resonates with you most from this deep dive? How do you think events like this shape our understanding of safety and responsibility? Let us know your thoughts, and until next time, stay curious.